Oh,
Welcome to another episode of the Aligned Life, the Goddess Life, where we dive into living life fully aligned, mind, body, and spirit, at peace and unbothered. I am sitting here with Lane, getting ready for our tarot talk this morning, where we're going to talk a little bit about intuition building. And I think we're also going to touch on that idea of like holding potential energy. But we were just talking and we were kind of coming to the conclusion that we don't share like our morning tea with you guys. Like before we go live, we tend to have like a little catch up session. So we're like mid catch up session for anybody who wants to like jump into that. Because I realized as we were going through it that we want to have this community with people. So you'll start getting little glimpses of our lives as we go through. But good morning, Lane. Thank you for
good
joining me.
morning.
I'm so excited to talk about these topics today. And we were talking about, having to do the adulting.
Yes. Well, and I also love the commitment to the podcast. Excuse me. Because then I get the opportunity to catch up with you. Like it's like scheduled in to catch up with you. And it is fun to jump into the Zoom and we do our little catch up. And I do like the idea of just sharing it because I think it flows into what our topic is. It's very on point with like, this is my day-to-day grind, the thing, the catch up as it flows into like building the intuition that we're going to be talking about and how to lean into trusting ourselves, but how we do that and show up for that in the aligned life, in the nitty gritty day to day
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
stuff.
we were talking about yesterday was one of those days that kind of just like came in all punches, like wasn't
Mhm.
holding any of them back.
No.
And we all took it with such a stride
Hmm.
that it was just beautiful. It was so beautiful. And you had things come up where you had to go pick your kid up from school. I had
Yeah.
to go to doctor's appointments with doctors I don't know in places I don't know either. So that was a lot.
Hmm.
But I did it and now we're here. I took my kids to do a few different new things yesterday too. And part of that authenticity in showing up for yourself and showing up for your kids, rolling with those punches is part of being aligned so much. And
Hmm.
we often forget that. We try so hard to align ourselves with these super positive aspects with what we have in this idea. We talk about manifestation, we talk about setting goals, but part of that's also like living your journey in the present. And that often gets overlooked.
Right. I mean, so yesterday was for me, it was like, okay, with the full moon, it was totally aligned, like new chapter, right? I'd closed an old chapter. I finished my commitment to supporting the middle school choir and accompanying them on the piano during the concert. And it was a full day of prep rehearsal, and then executing the concert. Yay, Monday, woo, full moon, done, check. And moving forward, yesterday's plan was to record this podcast with you and like a couple of things that like I'd set aside in order to complete the choir commitment and get my stuff in order. And instead, is like I was getting thrown, these unavoidables, right? Child calls, he's sick. Okay, I got to drop everything. I got to go deal with that. And then another to where my day totally got upended. But when you are aligned with what's in front of you, I didn't allow my expectations to dictate how I felt about the day as I moved through it. Right. And I think that's kind of where some of the hangup is in your spiritual practice is you may listen to somebody who says, well, you do this and expect these things to happen, like manifestations and blah, 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 and all these things. And if you get too hung up on the expectation, you're not in it and allowing these things to move through. And in reflection of my day, it was like, it was kind of a purging. It was like that last purge of stuff that's like, oh, okay, I gotta like deal with this. And now today is like a redo day. We can do the podcast.
Oh,
I can
right.
do the things, like, okay, here we are. I'm here now, and now I guess it's aligned. And that's okay.
Yes. Well, and I think you said like the key word in that, and you said it a few times, and every time you said it, I was like, yes, just push it through. And that word expectation.
Mm,
Um, when it comes to spiritual practice, when it comes to healing, trauma, any of those things that we also talk about in our other episodes, but so much when we talk about it in our spiritual practice, people don't see the expectations that they're putting on themselves or
yes.
how they expect that word to
Hmm.
show up in what they're doing. There's such an expectation into how you're going to connect with other people. There are expectations of how you're going to read tarot and how you're going to work with
Yep.
divination.
Yep.
There's so much. And if we don't release ourselves of it, then we're
Hmm.
not fully moving into our higher self. We're not moving into that soul compass, which becomes a blockage to our intuition.
Yeah. Yes.
And then you
So
can't read your cards.
right. So you start using intuition, and you expect it to feel a certain way, and for things to show up a certain way, and you're missing how it actually is. Right. And if you hinge everything upon this expectation, then you're led to disappointment. I'm not good enough. I'm not doing it right. Self-doubt, right? For example, I would have told you years ago that I do not do mediumship, where I can read past loved ones that, come through, because the way I saw it presented or how other people did mediumship, that was my expectation. Then, through trusting my intuition and doing my readings, I found, though, that they come through, but it just looks and feels totally different than what I had expected it to,
Oh,
which
absolutely.
was like mind blowing. I'm like, oh, wait, actually.
That's not what this looks like.
But I'm getting in this other way, I'm getting these hits, I'm getting this information, and part of intuition is trusting that. So when it came through, presenting it to the client, even though I feel crazy, this is what's coming through. It's like feels like left field, but then the client says, "Oh no, no, that's 100%, 100%." You know, um, just that's just as an example, but in your day-to-day life too, when you set up these expectations of how you think I mean, it's one thing to vision out like, okay, this is how I want my day to go, right? And set like markers and goals, and like, you got to make a grocery list before you go to the grocery store, or you're going to buy a bunch of crap. Yes. But when you get to the grocery store, you can still kind of have that checklist, but maybe you see something that spurs your interest and you're like, actually, I'm going to take dinner in a different direction. You know,
Right.
this isn't a wrong. This isn't a bad. It's just, I'm going to trust my gut with this one.
Oh, yeah. It's that ability to adapt, to
Yeah.
move through instead of become stagnant. And I'm reminded so much of like, and shout out to all my weird little friends that I know all over the internet. The people who often are very, very spiritual in combined martial arts, which is a very Eastern practice, but it is so interesting because that is the essential basic taught function of lots of martial arts is to move through your opponent, move through with your movements and become that energy flow. And that's the same thing that we do for divination. And I am dared to say that it is, in fact, what makes this a discipline across
Hmm.
it is learning how to release expectation, not live within expectation. We can admire and love all of these aesthetic ideas. We can fall into them, lean into them, But if we don't release the expectations that we often hold ourselves to because of media and aesthetics and all of these other people involved, then we lack the discipline to continue to move forward.
Yeah. And it looks different for everyone. There was a meme that I'm reminded of years ago where, on one hand you think, okay, I'm going to do tarot and I set up my altar and I have my candles and my crystals and it's so aesthetically pleasing, right? And then there's like the type B person who like wipes the Cheeto dust from their hands and they're like, "All right, let's go." You know, there's no right or wrong way to read the tarot. I mean, there is the foundation of symbology and meaning, but there's also this wonderful wiggle room to being aligned to what's coming through and open to it and not closing oneself off to those things coming through.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Um, and it's so interesting when we do start to finally accept and understand and find that discipline through that. Um, because when we're opening up to our higher self and we're in that channel, because for any of you that have like reached that idea of higher self and stepped into that, it feels like a channel. It feels like you have just like pushed yourself in as this puzzle piece, and you can hear, you can see, you can feel all of the different energies that are moving around you. And it's it's like you have, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like you become a receptor to it. You've hit the wavelength.
Well,
And
that's
oh, yep,
that's
continue.
100% accurate. I mean, this vessel of a body that we live in at base is just a receptor. It is only designed to receive information through our senses. And we all know about the, five major physical senses, but there's more than. And so you have to allow and open up and let go of the expectation of how it's supposed to show up.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I'm reminded so much of oh, why can't I think of the word will come to me, but it will not come out right now. But reading books, you and I talk about this often. When you just open a book
Mhm.
and
Bibliomancy.
bibliomancy, yes. Because that is such a basic, such a wonderful form when you just open it and you're like, okay, what do I need to know? And there it is, it comes in and
Sorry, love, can you pause it? I have a call from the school again.
oh yeah, definitely we can pause. And I'll go ahead and talk a little bit more while she is working on that. But in the eyes of intuition and getting back to that idea of discipline, um, getting back to that idea of removing expectation, one of the big pieces that we find that's